Welcome to the Salesforcesight podcast, hosted on and by Creme de la CRM. Today, we're diving deep into some really valuable insights straight from the Salesforce blog. The topic, it's absolutely buzzing right now, AI agents. AI designed to perform specific tasks, often interacting with other systems, sometimes autonomously, sometimes semi-autonomously. Our mission in this deep dive is basically to cut through the noise. We want to bring you the practical tips, the potential pitfalls, and the hard-won lessons learned directly from Salesforce's own experience and analysis. Think of it as your shortcut to understanding key strategies for successful AI adoption in your business. We've pulled insights from 3 really great articles, 7 Ways That Agentic AI Pilots Get Stuck by Laura Hilgers and Missy Roback, AI Workforce Management, Guiding Tomorrow's Blended Workforce by Lisa Lee, and Set Up AI Agents for Success, Lessons from Agentforce by Bernard Slowey. So lots of good stuff here.
And the timing for digging into these insights, well, couldn't be more critical, could it? These sources really hammer home both the huge opportunity and the very real-world challenges around AI agents right now. One stat that really jumped out at me was this prediction of a 327% surge in AI agent adoption just over the next 2 years.
Wow, 327%. That's massive.
It really is. We're not talking theory here. We're talking about AI agents getting embedded across, well, pretty much every business function, every industry, and fast. And the strategic need is clear, too. 96% of CIOs are already prioritizing AI adoption. Businesses want this.
Okay, so everyone's excited, planning things out, running pilots.
Exactly. Pilot activity is way up from about 37% late last year to 65% in the first quarter of 2025. So most companies are experimenting, but here's the surprising twist the articles point out. Despite all that piloting, the actual deployment rate, it stayed flat, stuck at just 11%.
Hold on. So nearly 2/3 are trying them out, but fewer than, 1 in 8 are actually putting them fully to work. Why is such a huge gap?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's really the core question this deep dive is going to help you answer. It's all about understanding why so many promising AI agent pilots just don't make it to full deployment. And, maybe more importantly, how you can navigate those challenges to actually succeed in bringing these agents into your operations.
Okay, you've got my attention. Let's get into it. We'll unpack those common reasons pilots get stuck. Then we'll look at how managing teams changes when you add AI agents to the mix. And finally, share some really practical sort of boots-on-the-ground lessons from Salesforce's own journey rolling out Agentforce, their platform for building AI agents. All right, let's tackle that first big puzzle. Why are so many AI agent pilots stalling out? Even with all this excitement and investment, the sources really dig into this.
Yeah, and you might think, instinctively that the problems are purely technical, like, oh, the AI isn't smart enough yet, or our tech stack isn't ready. But what's really interesting from these articles is that often the biggest stumbling blocks aren't just about the dazzling tech itself.
Okay, so if it's not always the tech, what is it then?
Well, one major issue they highlight is focusing too much on the capabilities of the AI rather than the actual business problem you're trying to solve. It's easy to get caught up in what the AI could do, in theory. But one article gives a pretty stark statistic. 60% of pilots get stuck, specifically because they fail to deliver clear, measurable ROI.
60%, wow.
Yeah. If you can't tightly connect the AI to a specific, valuable business outcome, you can't justify moving forward, right?
That makes total sense. It's that classic shiny new object syndrome. You need to pinpoint a specific, achievable goal first. You can't try to, boil the ocean with your very first AI agent project, like that example they mentioned of the research institution. They were really struggling with screening participants for clinical trials, just overwhelmed and short-staffed. That's a huge pain point. So they decided to zero in on that one specific painful problem and use an AI agent just for that screening piece. That laser focus seems key.
Absolutely. And it really forces you to ask the right question. Are you starting by asking, where can we use AI? Or are you asking, what's our biggest, most pressing problem, and could an agentic AI solution help solve that specific thing? That second approach, starting with the pain points and looking at them through an agentic solution lens, that's what's recommended. It keeps you focused on ROI and solving a real challenge.
And who needs to be involved when you're figuring out that problem and the solution? The articles seem pretty clear. It's not just the tech folks.
Definitely not. That's another crucial factor they bring up, getting the right people involved early. And that means specifically bringing the business team into the fold. Feasibility. Can we technically build this? Sure, that might be the tech team's primary domain. But desirability. How will this actually affect your customers or your internal users? Yeah. And viability. Is this actually a good investment based on the likely outcomes? Those questions absolutely need deep business input.
Right. For the people who actually understand the day-to-day process, the customers, the bottom line impact.
Exactly. If the people who will ultimately use or interact with the agent aren't in that planning room from day one, or if business leaders aren't weighing in on the value proposition, well, you risk building something that misses the mark or just isn't seen as worth the effort and cost. That alignment between business and IT on the core problems is so important for setting realistic expectations, too.
Okay, so focus on the problem, get the business team involved. But what about the human element? Putting AI in place can definitely stir up some anxiety, can it?
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge factor they mention. Worrying about performance. How will customers react? Will it actually create more work instead of less? That anxiety, that fear, it can absolutely stop a pilot dead in its tracks, especially for anything customer facing where the stakes just feel higher.
So how do you deal with that fear then? How do you get people comfortable?
The antidote they suggest is really about starting small. Pick a low-cost, low-risk use case first. Something where you can produce measurable results fairly quickly. Find that, low-hanging fruit. Something with a low barrier to entry where you can demonstrate some tangible value without betting the farm.
That's where examples like Montway come in, right? The auto transport company using Agentforce to build their AI agent, Sophie. Their biggest headache was just the sheer volume of customers calling or emailing asking, "Where's my car?"
Yeah.
Just constant repetitive queries.
Exactly. So Sophie now handles those status updates. It's a very specific, high-volume, pretty straightforward task. And the payoff. They saw improved customer satisfaction scores, faster support resolution times.
And measuring that success is key. Using concrete metrics like response quality or resolution rates, or even just tracking if agent actually solved the customer's issue, like Salesforce does on its own help site, that builds confidence.
It really does. Seeing the data, seeing it's providing a good experience, that makes people believe. It helps overcome the anxiety.
All right, so we've talked about dodging those pilot pitfalls. Start with the problem, involve the right teams, manage the anxiety by starting small and measuring. Now, let's say you've got that specific problem identified. You're ready to actually, build and deploy your AI agent. What are the practical steps? What's the nitty-gritty?
Data. It always comes back to data, doesn't it? It's absolutely foundational. This comes up again and again in the sources as just critical for success. As one source puts it pretty bluntly, AI agents are only as good as the data they have to work with.
It's the fuel for the engine, basically.
Precisely. And look, it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect on day one. Aiming for perfection can become its own kind of blocker. But it absolutely needs to be clean, reasonably updated, well-organized, and free of obvious errors or duplicates or weird formatting. Bad data is just, well, you called it junk food for AI earlier. It leads to poor performance, nonsensical answers, and ultimately a failed pilot.
And it's not just about quantity, right? Not just dumping a massive data lake onto the agent. You need the right content for the agent to actually answer the questions relevant to its specific job.
Exactly. That means figuring out what information is actually useful for that use case, getting rid of old stuff that's outdated or maybe even misleading, and dealing with things like confusing terms or multiple articles saying similar things, which can cause what they call content collisions and confuse the agent.
Right.
And that's where the idea of something like Data Cloud providing a unified contextual data foundation comes in. It's mentioned as being really helpful because platforms like Agentforce can then ground the AI in reliable, up-to-date data and context from across your different systems.
Okay, data sorted. What's next? The sources talk about onboarding the agent.
Yeah, but it's very different from onboarding a new human employee. It's much less about, traditional training and development, and much more about precise configuration and defining parameters, setting rules. Why? Because agents lack human interpretation. They lack common sense. They follow the rules you set with extreme literal precision.
That onboarding analogy is useful, though.
Right.
You wouldn't expect a brand new human hire to handle your most complex, sensitive support tickets on their first day, would you? You start them simple, let them learn the ropes, maybe shadow someone experienced.
Exactly the point made in the articles. Start your AI agent simple. Give it just one or two straightforward tasks first. Monitor it closely. Spot check its responses frequently. Make absolutely sure it's handling things correctly and safely. Only then, once you've built that confidence, do you start adding complexity and expanding its scope. Don't expect too much, too soon. Gradual rollout is key.
And while you're scaling up, what about setting boundaries? The articles talk quite a bit about guardrails.
Oh, crucial. Absolutely crucial. Setting clear rules for what the agent shouldn't do is vital. This is especially important around sensitive data, things like automatically masking personally identifiable information, maybe using tools like the Einstein trust layer that's mentioned, and also handling inappropriate questions or topics. But just setting the guardrails isn't enough. You absolutely have to actively test them.
Test them. How do you, like, try to trick them?
Sort of, yeah. By deliberately asking the agent potentially problematic questions or phrasing queries in unexpected ways, see how it responds. Does it stick to the guidelines? Does it accidentally leak company secrets? Does it, hallucinate or make things up? This kind of stress testing is completely non-negotiable.
That Salesforce example from the Lessons from Agentforce article really highlights this, doesn't it? About refining guardrails.
Yeah.
They initially set a really strict rule against discussing any competitor products on their help site agent. Made sense on the surface. But then a real customer asked a perfectly legitimate question about integrating a competitor's product with Salesforce. And the agent, following that strict rule, just went silent. Totally unhelpful.
Exactly. And they had to go back and refine that guardrail. The lesson there, and it's a big one, is about building smart guardrails, not just roadblocks. Guardrails should guide the conversation safely and keep it within the intended scope, but they shouldn't just abruptly block things, especially if the topic is actually relevant to what the customer needs. Guide, don't just block.
And that leads right into another key idea. These AI agents aren't set and forget tools. Once it's up and running, your work is definitely not done.
It's absolutely not. They need continuous monitoring, ongoing testing, and constant refinement based on how they actually perform out there in the real world, interacting with real users. The sources really emphasize this. Iteration is everything. You have to treat it as an ongoing process, not a one-time project.
So you're always kind of feeding it new information, updating the knowledge base, tweaking the configurations and parameters based on actual interactions and user feedback.
Precisely. Just like Salesforce did when they launched Agentforce on their own help site. They started with a limited scope. They listened to the feedback. They saw where the data gaps were, like realizing they needed more specific content for developer questions. And they expanded the knowledge base based on those real-world conversations. This continuous cycle monitor, test, learn, refine. That's the key to long-term success and actually getting sustained value out of your agent.
Okay, so we've covered avoiding the common pitfalls and the practical side of building and refining your agent. This all brings us to a bigger picture question these articles tackle.
Sure.
With AI agents becoming more integrated into our daily workflows, how does this fundamentally change things like leadership, team dynamics, and just general workforce management?
Yeah, it's a huge shift they're pointing to. The sources make it very clear that managers will increasingly be overseeing what they call a blended workforce. Teams made up of both humans and AI agents working together. This doesn't get rid of the need for strong leadership. If anything, it transforms it. You're leading people and machines.
And a really crucial part of navigating that transformation must be addressing employee concerns directly, right? Head on. With AI agent adoption expected to jump so much, people are naturally going to worry about their jobs, about displacement. That's a very real anxiety for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And the articles stress the need to proactively and openly address that anxiety, be transparent about what the agent's role is, and maybe more importantly, what it isn't. And crucially, look for opportunities to upskill your employees in those uniquely human areas, things like creativity, complex judgment, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, building relationships. That's vital for building trust.
So it's about showing people you're invested in their growth and the evolution of their role, not just trying to replace them.
Exactly. Salesforce's Agentforce Learning Day, which they mention, where employees actually learn how to use and integrate these AI tools into their own work. That's a great example of investing in human capacity right alongside the AI.
And manager skills have to evolve too, right? It's not just traditional people management anymore.
Definitely not. You'll need better communication and delegation skills, but specifically tailored for interacting effectively with agents. Defining those parameters clearly, specifying the desired output formats, setting those rules for when to escalate issues to a human, these become really critical delegation tasks for your new digital teammates. You have to be incredibly precise.
And alongside that, managers themselves probably need to get more proficient with the AI and the data behind it.
Yes, absolutely. Increased data literacy becomes essential for managers. Understanding what data is actually powering the agents, knowing how to interpret their performance dashboards, spotting data gaps. troubleshooting when agents don't perform as expected, anticipating future data needs to improve the agent over time, this level of data fluency becomes a core part of the manager's role in guiding that blended workforce effectively.
But importantly, the sources also really emphasize that those uniquely human qualities, empathy, ethics, nuanced judgment, they remain absolutely critical, perhaps even more critical in a blended workforce.
Precisely. Deciding when and how it's appropriate to use agents and data. Navigating those complex, gray area scenarios that company policies might not explicitly cover. Using human judgment to potentially override a strictly policy-driven AI suggestion. They give an example of a financial advisor using their deep understanding of a specific client's unique situation to override an AI's standard recommendation based only on generic policy.
Right.
Those are areas where human leadership, human judgment, and human ethics aren't just important, they're completely indispensable.
So the narrative really isn't about AI replacing humans, but more about AI elevating human talent, amplifying our capabilities, and positioning us as like co-creators and partners in this whole workplace transformation. AI as an ally.
Well put. And finally, kind of nestled within these discussions, one source does touch on a really fundamental practical decision that managers and leaders face. Do you build your own AI agent from scratch, or do you use a pre-built, enterprise-ready solution?
The classic build versus buy question. What's the trade-off there according to the sources?
Well, building it yourself, DIY, is presented as a pretty significant and ongoing investment. Not just the initial engineering and infrastructure costs, which can be substantial,
Yeah.
but critically, the continuous fine-tuning, the rigorous governance needed, maintaining compliance. It requires substantial time, money, and dedicated tech resources that, frankly, many companies, especially smaller ones, might struggle to afford or sustain long-term.
Okay, so building is potentially complex and expensive. What about the alternative?
Using pre-built enterprise-ready solutions like Agentforce itself is positioned for Salesforce customers is presented as being potentially much faster to achieve ROI. They throw out numbers like 4 to 6 weeks potentially, compared to maybe 6 to 12 months or even longer for a custom-built solution from scratch.
Wow, weeks versus months is a big difference.
Huge. And they also suggest it can be less expensive overall, maybe around 20% less cost, according to one report, cited partly because that core infrastructure, the compliance, the basic governance, is already handled by the platform provider.
Plus, using a low-code platform like the Agentforce Builder they mentioned makes it easier for maybe non-engineers or citizen developers to get started. And as one example showed with a luxury clothing retailer, you could even partner with an expert like a Salesforce partner to accelerate the process even further by using pre-built components and specialized know-how.
Exactly. So it seems that build versus buy choice is a really significant strategic consideration. It ties directly back to how quickly and effectively you can actually get your AI agent team up, running, and delivering value.
Okay, so wrapping up the Salesforcesight deep dive into these really valuable Salesforce blog posts on AI agents, we've seen that successful AI pilots, the ones that beat those tough odds, they succeed not just because of good tech, but because they start with a laser focus on solving specific business problems. They involve the business teams right from the beginning for that crucial context and buy-in. And they manage that very real human anxiety by starting small, picking low-risk use cases where you can actually measure success and build confidence.
Yeah, and we've also learned that data quality and organization are just non-negotiable, right? It's the essential fuel for your agent. Setting up agents requires really careful, precise configuration and an onboarding process that's very different from hiring a human. Thoroughly testing your guardrails, really pushing them, is crucial. And that continuous iteration, that cycle of monitoring, testing, and refining based on real-world use, that's absolutely essential for long-term value.
And looking ahead, leading effectively in this age of AI means really embracing the challenge of managing a blended workforce, humans and agents side by side. It means proactively addressing those human concerns about job impact with transparency and a real commitment to upskilling. And it means developing new skills ourselves, managers included, around AI literacy and data fluency, while doubling down on those uniquely human strengths: judgment, ethics, empathy.
It really paints a picture of a profound transformation of the workplace, doesn't it? Where AI serves not as a replacement for humans, but hopefully as an indispensable ally that amplifies and elevates what humans can do.
Absolutely. And honestly, there is so much more granular detail, practical advice, and specific examples packed into these articles that we could possibly cover in full here. We really encourage you to check them out directly from the source. We will put links to all 3 articles in the description for this deep dive so you can explore further.
Yes, definitely worth the read. Thank you for joining us for this analysis of these key insights from the Salesforce blog.
And as you think about bringing AI agents into your own work or organization, or maybe you're looking at expanding pilots you already have running, here's maybe something to really consider. Given how critical human judgment, empathy, and ethical decision-making are becoming in this blended workforce, how will you actively work to build trust, not just in the AI technology itself, but also with the human colleagues who will be working alongside it, day in and day out? Something to think about. Until next time.